So hi everyone, our topic for today is all about the colonialism and tradition, and the Spanish-Moro Wars will be discussed by my other groupmates. So our coverage for today's discussion, which is the colonialism and tradition, covers the colonial. First is the colonial aims, second is the Spanish-Moro policy, and third is a video presentation. I'm going to present a video presentation that is related to the topic about colonialism and tradition. So next is the... So by the way, I am April Casey Acoymo, your first reporter from Group 1, under History 3, Section CC1. Introduction. The colonial system Spain established in the Philippines following successful takeover of Manila from the Muslim depended on the broad aims of Spanish colonialism. First is these may be summarized under the headings such as God, glory, and gold. And next, these aims, which were not necessarily mutually exclusive, were clearly expressed in the written instruction to the expedition from Magellan to Legazpi. So next, we have the colonial aims. So the portrait of Spain as a colonial power would be incomplete without the religious color. So one of the colonial aims, first is we have the need to spread Christianity throughout the Spanish dominions. Next is the New World, or Latin America and North America, as well as in the Philippines. And during the expedition 1565, accompanied by religious missionaries, were as much prepared to preach the Christian faith. And according to my research, the aim of Spanish colonization of the Philippines had three objectives in its policy toward the Philippines. First is to acquire a share in the spice trade. Next is to develop contacts with China and Japan in order to further Christian missionary efforts there, and lastly is to convert the Filipinos to Christianity. So next is when Magellan landed at Limasaua, Butuan, the first significant act taken was the celebration of Mass and the conversion of Raha Humabon and his people. And next we have this is the 5 Augustinian friars labored in harmony with Legazpi. So the Christianization in Cebu started with the conversion of King Tupa's niece, including King Tupas and his son. With the aid of Christianized Cebuanos, the Muslim stronghold of Manila was taken by the Spanish troops. Then Spain introduced Christianity to the Philippines in 1565 with the arrival of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. Beginning in 1350, Islam had been spreading northward from Indonesia into the Philippine archipelago. And with the aid of Christianized Cebuanos, the Muslim stronghold of Manila was taken by the Spanish troops. Then the colonial aims, which is the Oriental Empire, placed the Philippines strategically in the heart of the Spanish imperial design. So the Spanish effort to acquire the Philippines, notwithstanding the fact that the islands had become a part of Portuguese territorial rights following the signing of the Treaty of Zaragoza in 1529. So in this treaty, King Charles of Spain relinquished claims to the Philippines in exchange for 3,500 gold ducats. So next we have the 4 aims of Spanish colonial rule. First is the political, next is economic, third is social, and lastly is the cultural aspect of administration. And effectively to ensure that power, wealth, and status in the colony were conveniently and exclusively enjoyed by the Spaniard as matter of birthright. So next is the Spanish-Moro policy. So we have the Moro-Christian confrontation. The Moro-Christian confrontation began in the 16th century when Spain established sovereignty in the Visayas and Luzon and sought to extend in Mindanao and Sulu. So the Spaniards drove Islam out of Luzon and Visayas and over 3 centuries campaigned in Mindanao and Sulu. So the basic policy of Spain towards the Moros was fully spelled out in instructions of Governor General Francisco de Sande to Captain Esteban Rodriguez de Figueroa in May 1578. And the Spanish sought to accomplish 4 things. First is to get them to acknowledge Spanish sovereignty over the territory. And next is to promote the trade with them, limiting their trade to the Philippines, islands, and exploiting natural resources of Moro land with a view to their commercial exploitation. And the bring an end to Moro piracy against the Spanish shipping and an end to Moro raids on the Christianized settlements of the Visayas and southern Luzon. And next is to Hispanize and Christianize the Moros along the same lines, followed with respect to other lowland Filipino Indio groups. And in addition, I've researched some facts about the Spanish spread Christianity in the Philippines. So, Christianity was first brought to the Philippine Islands by the Spanish missionaries and settlers, and who arrived in waves beginning in the early 16th century in Cebu. And so the Spaniards want to spread Christianity in the Philippines to bring salvation to the souls of the indigenous peoples and to spread the Catholicism. The Church and the Crown alike viewed the role and the presence of the Church in the Americas as a buffer against the corrupt encomenderos and other European settlers. And lastly, one of the Spanish-Moro policy was to the Spain's, which was the root of the Moros' fierce resistance to the Spaniards and their Christianized Filipino allies. Captain Rodriguez was instructed to order the Moro chief not to admit any more preachers of the doctrine of Mahoman, since it is evil and false, and that of the Christians alone is good. So, in addition to my reports, this will be discussed to the next reporter, which is about the continuation about the Spanish-Moro policy that will be discussed by the next reporter. And before I will end this discussion, I'll present a video relating to the Spanish colonialism and tradition.
Colonized by Spain at about 300 years ago. It all started with the discovery of the Philippines by Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. It is Ferdinand Magellan who arrived in the Philippines to head a Spanish expedition searching for the Spice Island in 1521. Magellan never completed the journey by himself. He was then killed with an encounter with the natives in the Philippines after having claimed the Philippines is for Spain. Magellan's arrival introduced Christianity in Cebu. It all started with the baptism of King Humabon and Queen Juana of Cebu. It was followed by the voyage of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, who was famous for the blood compact with Raja Secatuna of Bohol. Spain's primary aim and intention in the Philippines was to spread their religion, the Roman Catholicism. There are three main reasons why the Spaniards wanted to spread their power across the world. It is acronymed as the 3 Gs. The first G is for God, which is the conversion of natives to Christianity. The second G is gold, which is the accumulation of wealth and gold. And the last G is glory, which is the supremacy of Spain over Portugal as a superpower.
So, hello everyone. Today I will continue to discuss the Spain's Moro policy. So, Captain Rodriguez was instructed to order the Moro chief not to admit anymore preachers of the doctrine of Mahomet or Muhammad, since it is evil and false, and that of the Christians are only the good one. So, the captain was to address himself to the Lord of Mindanao. So, he ordered that the Christian laws should be preached and the natives should be listened and be converted. And then the Moro responded to this design with violence and warfare. And the Moros' expedition is jihad or a holy war, cause of the Visayas and Luzon, where their war vessels periodically raided, killed, and plundered Christian settlements. So it was a bloody war. In the middle of the 18th century, there was a mission on Jesuit in Sulu, and then this was also the conversion of Sultan Alimuddin. And then the major legacy of 3 centuries of Moro-Spanish warfare in the Philippines is the Moro image and Christian image. So let's first talk about the Moro image. So the Moro image is the picture of Moro is a cunning, cruel, treacherous savage, a pirate, a raider, a slaver. That image to this very day is operative in the minds of many, if not most, Christian Filipinos whose forebears after all bore the brunt of the Moro jihad. And also, there is also a negative equally on the Christian image. So, the Christian is a coward, a land grabber, when if he could, would destroy Islam. And then, let's move on to the Spanish-Moro Wars. So, the colonizers describe this as the Guerras Piratics, or a fight against Moros. So, this war is divided into 6 phases by Dr. Cesar Majul, a Muslim in the Philippines. So, the phase 1 is the Brunei Cut-Off, the conflict between the Muslims and the Spaniards. This war on the archipelago began on the Legazpi's arrival on 1565 and ended with the invasions of the Brunei between 1578 and 1581.
Moro Wars, the first 4 stages. Onslaughts, incursions, expeditions, battles. All of the violence and bloodshed for territory and dominance in Spanish territories and Muslim lands were eventually called the Moro Wars by the historians. The term Moro was used to refer to anyone who is inhabiting the islands of Mindanao, Sulu, and Palawan, who all belonged to the Islamic faith. The Spanish-Moro conflict was just the beginning of the series of wars that lasted for centuries. Spain initiated the conflict when they invaded the Moro territories. Their effort to subjugate the Moros to their rule started in as early as 1500s with the goal of spreading Christianity among all of the Filipinos. For the Moros, they have always been free and self-governing. This is why the Moro resistance against the Spaniards lasted for over 300 years. Stage 1. Brunei Cut-Off. The first stage represents a conflict between the Spaniards and Borneans. The Spaniards wanted to conquer the Philippines through Christianization, while the Borneans wanted to continue their economic, political, and religious development over the archipelago. For the Spaniards to ensure their hold on conquered territories, it became
Hi, I'm Saliha El Mambuay. I'm going to continue the Spanish-Moro Wars by Cesar Mahul, Phase 2, Strongholds. The second phase of the complex started with the Spaniards trying to establish fort and colonize in Muslim lands to exact tribute from the Muslim and to win them from their alliance trinate. It's in around 1599 in this phase. The Sulu Sultan paid in modest tribute, so did some of the chieftain in the Polangi. He rules in 1587 Conference of Tondo and chieftain led by the Magatin Salamat failed. Salamat tried to contact the Brunei Sultan for help against the Spaniard but failed in his endeavor. In 1591, the Spanish government decided to colonize Mindanao and incorporate into Philippines colony. It was planned to use Mindanao as base of the eventual conquest of the Moluccas and the intimidation of Borneo and Java in April 1696. The newly designated governor of Mindanao, Esteban Rodriguez, was struck on the head with the campelan. He remained alive only for a few hours. Nevertheless, the Spaniards were able to build a fort around Sampakan or Tampakan, which was midway between the Maguindanao and Buayan settlement. The Maguindanao and Buayan sultanates tried to dislodge the Spaniard. 800 warriors from Ternate under the leadership of an uncle of the Ternate Sultan came to help the Muslim to avail eventually lack of supplies and lack of supplies and difficulty in communication led by the Spaniards to abandon their fort. They retried the areas of Zamboanga where they built Fort La Caldera. Continuous hardship, however, made them abandon this strong fort in 1597. The second phase thus indeed defeated for the Spanish invader. Something to note in this phase is that the tornado aid came not only on account of kinship relation between the leading families of Mindanao and the Moluccas and religious ties, but also because the Ternatan realized that the loss of Mindanao would mean that it could be served as base of Spanish operation against them. At least a strong Maguindanao and Buayan meant to a strong defense line before Ternate. Phase 3 counterattack. The third phase of the conflict began in 1599 to 1600 when the Manawans launched an offensive against the Spanish force in Visayas and extended competing with Spain for the collection of tribute there. The first Spanish counter-offensive utterly failed. However, the Spaniards later on success in conquering the Trinidad in 1635. They established a strong fort in Zamboanga. Significance about this phase was the Sulu. Maguindanao and Buayan had aid the Dutch to had appearance in the area is not only helping Muslim, at least encouraging them to create more difficulties for the Spanish rebels. In 1599 to 1600, the Raja in Maguindanao and Buayan made two devastating raids of Visayas. In 1606, one of the biggest fleet in feet out by the Spaniards went to Ternate with. After the series of fierce battle, the Ternatant lost their sultan was captured. The Hara in Fulangi fears that the returning victorious Smith would attack them. They decided to make peace with the Spaniards. 2 years after, when they decided to fit and fleet against the Visayas, they were dissuaded from doing so by the Spaniards, who were prepared for another fleet for some time. The Spaniards were to get some respite from the Maguindanao and Buayanon, but trouble came from another quarter, the Sulu. The presence of Dutch ship in Philippines waters in 1616 encouraged the Sulu to attack the settlement as far as Cavite and Camarin. They boarded the Cavite shipyard and captured some Spaniards for ransom. There is evidence of Brunei aid in the above venture. In 1627, in revenge for the molestation of the Sulu ambassador Dato' Aki Iban by the Spaniard who put him in a cell and conflicted in his bill, the Sulis, about 30 Karakas and with about 2,000 warriors, attacked the shipyard in Camarin. The field was led by the Sulu Sultan Raja Bungso. Much artillery, guns, ammunition, iron rice were captured. While the Spaniards were busy with the Sulu, another element arose in Maguindanao which was give them great difficulties for the next 50 years. This was the rise of Katli Kudarat as the leader of the Iranon and Maguindanao. Noteworthy in the first three phases was the Muslim captured Spaniard for ransom purpose. The Spaniard did the same when they captured Muslim. The Muslim also enslaved the native from the Spaniards' hill territories in order to have them row their boat, thus allow the warrior to concentrate on fighting. Significance in the first three phases in this phase is that the Muslims in the Philippines were helped by neighboring principality. This alliance did not only reflect marriage ties between ruling families, they represent a concentrated effort against the intrusion of Western imperialism and Christianity in the island of Southeast Asia.
2. Strongholds. The phase starts when the Spaniards attempted to reduce the people from Sulu and Maguindanao into submission. The Spaniards believed that the formation of a colony in Maguindanao would help them conquer the Moluccas. So, the Spanish government in Manila sent Captain Esteban Rodriguez de Figueroa to Jolo to pacify the island of Mindanao and establish a colony in the area of the Pulangi River. The Spaniards had many motives. One is for Mindanao's rich natural resources and the belief that if they were able to pacify Mindanao, it will be easier for them to exact obedience from the kingdoms of Brunei, Sulu, and Java. Captain Esteban arrived in the mouth of Pulangi with 214 Spaniards and 1,500 native allies. However, in Buayan, Esteban was struck on the head with a kampilan by a relative of the local ruler, which eventually caused his death. The Spaniards returned to Manila, defeated. Stage 3. Counterattacks. The Moros started an offensive against the Spaniards in Visayas. In 1602, another offensive was carried out by the Muslims, and this was so far the biggest offensive ever organized, commanded by Dato' Buisan. The Spanish retaliated with the attack in Jolo, led by Juan Galinato. Raja Buisan and his allies countered with an attack in central Visayas. The Spaniards retaliated and signed a treaty that lasted for 25 years. In 1627, an incident that involved the humiliation of a Datu by the Spaniards angered the Sultanate leadership. The Sultan of Sulu led 2,000 warriors and attacked the Spanish base and shipyard in Camarines Sur in central Visayas. The Spanish retaliated against Sulu and won. Spanish commander Lorenzo de Olazo invaded Sulu again, but the Sultanate forces were prepared, prompting the Spaniards to withdraw. These counterattacks did not offer a clear victor for this stage.
So let's proceed to the next topic, that is the phase 4, which is Fortress War. From the beginning of the fortification of Zamboanga in 1635 up to its abandonment in 1663, It was represented the Spanish determination to conquer Sulu and the Sultanatas in Mindanao once and for all and establish missions among them. The task of Governor Conquara was threefold: to conquer and capture Codarat and put Spanish puppet in the Maguindanao Sultanate. It is to capture the main quota of the Sulu Sultan and establish colonies in Sulu, and to invade Brunei once again and to put in securely under Spanish sovereignty. Until the triumphant Conquera was given a hero's welcome in Manila and his battles were enacted in place celebrating his victory. They were the first Moro plays in the country, and the next year, 600 Spaniards and 1,000 native allies laid siege to the Sulu Sultan's Kota in Jolo. Until the subsequent Spanish attempt to subject the Maranao was short-lived since Kudarat was able to galvanize their opposition. The Spaniards found too great difficulty trying to pacify the Guayanons, and the guerrilla warfare of the Sulu was taking its toll. The Spanish reaction to all this were to pursue a policy of destroying all Muslims' orchards, plantations, and seacraft. They also adopted a plan of depopulating Muslim settlement while enslaving as many Muslims as possible. But Codarat's gaining strength forced the Spaniards to make a treaty with them in 1645. The next year, they concluded a treaty with Sulu, pledging to abandon all their forts in Sulu. A factor which led to this peace treaty was that the Dutch threat. Until that peace with Kudarat was broken in 1655, when the Spanish ambassador was assassinated on account of his insistence to convert the Sultan. To prevent Spanish retaliation, the Sultan formally declared jihad the next year and asked the aid of the Sultan of Makassar, Sulu, Ternate and Brunei on the principle of the protection of Islam. So, until it happened that there would be an interlude of peace between the Muslims and the Spaniards for the next 50 years. Left to themselves, the Sultanates tried to recapture their former commercial prosperity. Plantations were once again flourishing and new vessels built. Sulu came to possess the North Borneo territory in Brunei and began to fulfill part of the power vacuum in Borneo. So let's proceed to the phase 5, which is the Spanish king on account of Jesuit insistence. This was issued various royal order for the occupation and refortification of Zamboanga in 1718, and the royal order was complied with soon. The fort was garrisoned and made stronger than before, which is the fifth phase was to commence soon. The 1720-1721 attack of the Sulu and Iran to dislodge the Spaniards from the fort failed in spite of the use of hundreds of war vessels and thousands of warriors. Until 100 of Muslims were carried into captivity, while hundreds of Christian natives were captured and sold as slaves in Makassar in Java. So fierce were the Muslims' raids in the Visayas that in some settlements the collection of tribute by the Spaniards went below 50%, only 50%, and the British invasion of Manila in 1762 created lull in the fighting. The Muslims remained unquarred. They again began to accelerate their commercial activities, and this time they were concentrating on the British trade. Thus, the sixth phase of the wars commenced. The Spanish expedition to Sulu in 1851 forced the Sultan to a treaty. Although the Spaniards interpreted the treaty as one where the Sultan accepted Spanish sovereignty, the Sultan simply took it as a friendly treaty between sovereign equals. Another Spanish campaign in 1876 to capture Jolo was intended to represent a fait accompli to force foreign powers to accept Spanish territorial claims in return for recognition of their corresponding claims elsewhere. So the Spanish excuse for the campaign this time was that the Sulu Jamal al-Azam had ignored previous treaties. Until Jolo had to be abandoned by the Sulu. With the Sultan fleeing to the interior, it was during this time that he Sabah territory to the British company. A treaty among Britain, Germany, and Spain finally provided the Spanish sovereignty extended to Sulu. Abandoned by all, was eventually forced to accede to the peace treaty of 1871. It was the last treaty entered into between Spaniards and the Sulu. It provided a sort of Spanish protectorate for Sulu while giving the Sulu a great deal of autonomy. The Sultan tried to abide as much as possible with the treaty, but he could not control those Datus and their followers who kept on harassing the Spaniards to the extent that Jolo became, in effect, a town under siege. Juramentados became more frequent. Meanwhile, the Spaniards tried to consolidate their hold on Mindanao. A few expeditions were sent to the Maranao areas and to Buayan. Cotabato became a Spanish outpost, and Spaniards were able to build strong forts along the Pulangi, and the only real opposing force against them was Sultan Anwar ud-Din, Datu Uttu. The Maguindanao Sultanate had become a shadow of its former self. By the time the American arrived in the Philippines in 1898, the Spanish force in traditional Muslim lands were confined to a few well-guarded outposts that were often harassed. The Muslims still remained. In general, unconquered, this was the situation. American found them in